Okay, so I have Maria here with us today. How are you, Maria?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here and share with us about Trend Community.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So, can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your background prior to co founding Trend Community?
Prior to Trend, seems like so long ago now, my husband and I were working in sort of the digital health space. I'd worked in pharma, I'd done some work in regulatory affairs, and we had actually become quite entrepreneurial and started a data analytics company, an AI company, with a couple of other co-founders. And so that's sort of the background that relates to Trend. We were also both rowers, which I don't talk about a lot, but had been training for the U.S. national team. And so while my degree is in psychology, I taught myself how to program so that I could train for the national team and have sort of a job while I was doing that.
I love that. I knew that part of your story, but I love hearing it back because I think it's so fascinating that you taught yourself, A, but also that it was because you were so focused on something that you were passionate about. And that is how you met your husband, also, right? In
It is,
rowing?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we made the U.S. national team in 2004 together and met in Banyulis.
Wow. I
Yeah.
love that. So let's talk about Trend Community and how you and your husband ultimately came to co found this. So, Trend Community is a digital health analytics company that turns the conversation of rare, chronic, and emerging disease communities into actionable insights. Like many great ideas, this company started as a result of a personal experience. Can you tell us more about the journey that led you and your husband, Christopher, to co found this company?
Sure. So as I mentioned, in 2011, actually, we started that data analytics company, and I was 8 months pregnant actually when we did a startup accelerator in upstate New York, and then in 2012, our first child, was born, and she was diagnosed at 10 days old with a rare disease called Prader-Willi syndrome. And so, as is pretty much, I think, the case with most people who receive a diagnosis like that, we just kind of stopped everything for a moment, and we're really focused on trying to figure out, what did this mean for our daughter? What did this mean for our family? We dug into the medical literature. We connected with friends who were doctors and really just tried to sort out, what to do next. And then fortunately found a group of caregivers on Facebook. And that was really the first time that we had hope, because what we'd read about Prader-Willi syndrome and what we've been told about it was really scary. But then when I joined this group and saw how well, the kids were doing, I realized that there was a really big gap between what we'd read about it in the medical literature and what was actually possible.
And what is the syndrome, actually? Can you explain it for us?
Sure. So Prader-Willi syndrome is a rare genetic disorder. It's caused by deleted genetic material on chromosome 15. And the hallmark features of the disease are something called hyperphagia, which is a chronic insatiable hunger. It is so bad that families have to lock up their kitchens, and have to really protect the person living with PWS from binge eating, and then also issues related to obesity. However, when Tay, our daughter, was born, we were told that this would never be her problem because there were so many promising drugs in clinical trials.
Wow. So that's amazing. And you really found like you said, so much comfort and support in these communities. And that really is sort of what laid the foundation for what Trend Community is now. So your process at Trend is really about listening. Can you tell us more about how this technology listens to online conversations happening within underserved, rare, chronic, and emerging disease communities, and then how it offers powerful insights to community stakeholders, medical teams, researchers, and more? How does that work, and what are the greatest benefits that come from sharing these type of insights?
So while we did have a lot of hope when we saw how the kids were doing, we'd been told things like our daughter would never go to college, our daughter would never have a family. And in fact, there were kids who were going to college and doing these things that defied, what we had been told was possible. However, the disease is very complex. So there are lots of different things going on, not just the hunger and obesity. And so our goal was really to understand all of the different challenges of kids with PWS so that we could, ensure that our daughter would have the best possible health outcome and understand how to best manage the disease so that we could make that happen. And so we started really like literally listening, or reading, the posts in Facebook and observing, all of the different experiences that parents were describing. And we learned a lot of things about PWS by doing this. And then, fast forward, we realized that there was a real opportunity to generate data from the conversations that were happening, because many of the things that we were observing and learning, we weren't reading about in the medical literature. We weren't told. And just to help you understand, one of the first discoveries we made as we started to use AI to analyze the conversations within that PWS community, we linked PWS to another rare disease, to narcolepsy. So we learned that parents thought their kids were faking falling asleep. And there were lots of other clues that the kids were experiencing symptoms of narcolepsy. And so that's how, that's sort of the potential for the AI. In practice, social listening is something that's used all the time to analyze conversations that are happening on social platforms so that companies can, feed us ads that are relevant to us. When you're having a conversation on one of the social platforms and suddenly an ad pops up, that's because
people are always talking about that, especially recently. Yeah. Like, how does that happen?
Right.
But this makes sense.
So that we're using those same techniques, but in applying it to those conversations that happen within those closed support groups where every day we're coming to find support, to get answers, and talking about all of the things that are happening in our daily lives.
Such a great example of the power of AI in a positive way that, as I said, I think sometimes it really freaks people out. Yeah. Like, how are they listening? Why are they listening to me? But this is such a great example of how powerful of a tool AI can be. So can you tell us more about what this information really does going beyond once you capture it, right? So who are you sharing it with, and how does that advance things in terms of research and treatment?
Yeah, so the reason that we started Trend, so early days, we were just doing, it was very personal. We just wanted to figure out how to help our kid. That was the goal. And then in 2016, the FDA passed the 21st Century Cures Act, which basically obligates the pharmaceutical industry to incorporate the patient voice throughout the drug development process. And so we knew that we had a really unique way to capture many voices and bring many perspectives and lived experiences to the pharmaceutical industry. And so having that sort of in the back of our minds, we've set everything up so that we could use the data for things like FDA applications. So we use an IRB, an ethical review board to review our protocols and our processes. All of our data analysts are HIPAA trained. So we've taken a lot of steps to ensure that we're collecting data in a way that's ethical and is, really a privacy first approach. And the people then that can use that data, we've been able to publish on the data. We present the data at patient and scientific conferences. And so, as I mentioned, the FDA and other regulatory agencies can use that data as sort of documentation of unmet need, for example, in the same way that they would use data that comes out of a patient-focused drug development meeting or a listening session. Pharmaceutical companies can use the data to understand how to best set up their protocols or to understand barriers to recruitment, things like that. Yeah. So there's lots of different ways that, industry and regulatory agencies can use the data. But also the communities themselves can use the data to drive forward initiatives that are important to them.
I love this. And really what I take from that and everything that you just said, and especially having the experience that I've had with my own nonprofit in the scleroderma space, which is a rare disease. That's the organization that I founded after I lost my mom to that disease. I've seen over the years what a disconnect there is between what the patient community is feeling and experiencing and those who are working really hard to find solutions. There's this disconnect of them really not understanding or knowing the things that the patients would often tell me when we were interviewing them. And I think that what you're now doing is creating this powerful tool to bridge that gap, and that you're just giving access to this really vitally important information that's a vitally important piece of getting closer to better therapies and, even a cure for some of these illnesses, or really just a better quality of life for those who suffer and the people around them who are working to care for them. Again, it's just amazing to hear how AI can play such a powerful part in that, and that you've developed this from such a personal perspective.
I think also, just to build upon that, communities, we only have so many resources, and patient organizations or, communities more broadly tend to focus on the things that are, maybe most devastating, like, hyperphagia and Prader-Willi syndrome. So, we sort of have so much bandwidth and so much time. And so what I love about this is that it can empower many different people to do, whatever it is that is personally meaningful to them. So we've been able to drive forward research and drug development around sleep disorders in Prader-Willi syndrome, while, other community leaders focus on finding treatments for the hunger, for example.
Right. And I guess does that play into your community first approach and how you're really working to promote a more holistic understanding of living with rare disease? When all of these different people are able to focus on certain areas, it really does sort of bring together more of that holistic approach.
Yeah, and the other piece is that our business model part of the business model is a pre-competitive obligation for our clients. So if we're working with an industry partner, we are always organizing pre-competitive research alongside, whatever projects we might be doing with them. So that's important too, because, as you know, we're all invested in finding treatments and cures, but, it doesn't always mean that those are going to be available to us in our lifetime. So I think it's really important for, industry to always be giving back and to make sure that the people who are brave enough to come forward and participate, that there's something in it for them.
100%. And I love that you advocate for that. And again, you advocate for it from such a personal perspective. And that I have found, in anybody I've worked with in the nonprofit space or the B Corp space that has done something from a personal experience, like you have this fire in you that's a little different, that just you are a true advocate. And I love that about what your company stands for too. So there are over 10,000 rare diseases that impact nearly 400 million people globally. That number hit me when I read that. That's big. And only 5% of known rare diseases have an approved treatment option. So how would you say Trend Community's technology approach and overall mission is helping to change that?
So even if a disease doesn't have a formally organized patient organization, likely they're talking on social media. So it's been a great tool for people living with rare and chronic conditions to find one another. Most of these rare conditions they're rare, right? So it's important for there to be sort of a global community. So I think just obviously it is a way to enable research for many, many different diseases, because we're literally turning their conversations into data. Yeah. You don't need to stand up a registry. You don't need to do a big natural history study. Those things are all really important, but it is a, almost zero burden way to just start collecting data with your community. And then I think the other piece is that I hope that as treatments and potentially cures come online, the phenotypes of these diseases will continue to shift, right? Things are going to change, and the things that we need, our most pressing, unmet needs are going to change, and we really need a way to keep a pulse on what's happening from day to day. We can't always go back to the literature and assume that, my daughter's condition is described there, right? I hope that things will get better and things will change. And so this is a really easy way to kind of keep on top of that.
Yeah. And as you were saying, that it's when you talk about all the different ways that typically these, people in research are collecting data, you're really fast tracking things,
right,
by being able to connect them to this data. And that to me is super encouraging and inspiring for all of these rare diseases, that maybe we can take 10 steps forward more quickly.
Absolutely.
With this sort of technology. And I want to talk about advocacy again, sort of as we just had touched on it. So you say that your work amplifies the voice of every community member because you believe that every voice is valuable in fostering change. Can you tell us more about the importance of advocacy and awareness when it comes to rare diseases? And what would you say is the greatest value in cultivating stronger communities around rare disease?
One of our community managers, Matt Horsnall, he's living with narcolepsy. He always says, not everybody either can or wants to participate in research or a clinical trial, and not everyone is a public speaker, right? But with the work that we're doing, and even without Trend, just the social media in general is giving so many more people a voice. And so I think that just sort of fundamentally it is creating a platform for many, many people to share their perspectives. Whereas, without the sort of social component, you tend to have, a core group of people that sort of like you and like me, we're comfortable going out there sharing our stories, but there's so many other stories, to be heard.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so important that we find a way to get all of those voices heard. I definitely can relate to that from, the work that I do with Project Scleroderma. It's all about the patient storytelling.
Exactly.
And when you get a chance to give somebody the opportunity that, maybe was willing to share but never really knew how to. And then you get them into this documentary space, and at first it's a little intimidating for them, but then they open up, and afterwards they are just like, that was life-changing because they felt heard. And I've come to see that that's such a huge piece of the puzzle in the mental health burden of many rare diseases, is just that people need to be heard.
Well, and then to hear those personal stories are really important. What you're
Yes.
doing is so important too. And to hear people telling, sharing their experiences and telling their stories, but then to show that that one experience is also being experienced by thousands of other people. That's powerful too. So that I know that it's not just that my kid happens to have narcolepsy and Prader-Willi syndrome, that there are lots of kids with PWS who are experiencing something similar.
Totally. And I think also being able to share different varieties of the story. To your point, you were saying this earlier, like every person is experiencing something different. And so if you're able to watch somebody and you're living this experience, you're able to say like, oh, wow, like, we have similarities, but we have differences in our experience too. But that you're just raising all sorts of awareness across the board when you're sharing a varied, a variety of stories. And I love that you're able to tap into that in such a powerful way with all of this, community listening and being able to pull from so many different experiences.
Well, and then you can start linking them too, right? I mean, PWS brought us to the narcolepsy community, and then sharing across those two communities brought us to many rare neurodevelopmental disorders that realized that they were also experiencing similar symptoms. And one of the most profound things that I've heard was a mom. Her name is Terry Jo Bichelle. I don't know if you've met her. She has an adult son with Angelman syndrome. And we'd organized the Sleep Summit to talk about what sleep disorders look like across different rare conditions. And she has a nonprofit, and she's developing endpoints and biomarkers and all of these things. And it wasn't until she heard me describe my daughter's experience as a baby falling asleep while she was eating that she had an aha moment that her son was likely had been experiencing similar symptoms. And kids with Angelman syndrome are nonverbal. So she has talked about how important it is to learn from, communities where kids are maybe experiencing similar things, but that the kids can articulate themselves what that feels like.
Right. And so she was able to say, he couldn't tell me that, but now I can put the dots together.
Exactly. Isn't that cool?
That's so cool. That's really, really powerful. And I would imagine that this has got to, and I know you may not take it on because you're more humble than this, but I think it's got to feel incredible to know that you've done something to spark this type of healing for people, just to connect and know like, oh, wow, okay, now things are much clearer for me in whatever my child's diagnosis is, and that your technology and the efforts you've made has helped people to connect in that way.
Well, we're grateful. It's made an incredible impact for our family, for our daughter. And as much as the technology is an important piece, we're also so fortunate to have all of the communities who have been willing to, hook in and share their data. And without the data, the technology can't do anything, right? So
true.
I'm very proud, and we love, what we do, but it really does take, a village. It takes a lot of people kind of joining us on this journey.
And trusting you. I think they probably have to trust, to buy into being willing to have the listening component, But I can see that it's totally a community effort, which is also why I love that it's called Trend Community.
Great.
That
Thanks.
makes a lot of sense. So Trend Community is also a certified B Corporation. Can you tell us more about what that means and why is it important to you that your company hold that type of certification?
When we realized we had, the potential to impact so many rare and chronic diseases and incorporate, we did briefly consider, a nonprofit model. There were a few reasons we decided not to do that. One is that we felt to develop the kind of technology that we're developing, we thought we could better do so as a for-profit model. And second, interestingly, it allows us to, we're not competing for funding with our nonprofit partners. So that was another important reason. However, we wanted to ensure that whatever happened with the company as we grew, that there would be an obligation to the vision. And a B Corp is basically it's a for-profit model where companies are, required to have a social impact component. And B Corp certification is this rigorous assessment of that. So you have to, apply for certification and you have to demonstrate that, as part of doing business, there's also a certain level of social impact that's happening.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way until you said that. But the part about for your work to live on, you want to make sure that it's going to be held to these type of standards so that it stays within the frame of what you intended it to be. That makes a lot of sense. So on this podcast, we often discuss the topic of compassion. It's sort of my favorite topic. Can you tell us what your own definition of compassion is and how you feel greater levels of compassion and empathy can positively impact the rare disease community?
Yeah, I was like, wow, that's a really good question. When I was reading through the questions you were thinking about asking. So first of all, I think especially when we're personally motivated to do the work that we're doing, sometimes it's easy to be kind of consumed by what's happening in your own life, right? We're all living with hard. And I think fundamentally for me, it's just to remember that we're all on our own personal journeys and that on, a day-to-day basis when we meet people, when I meet you, and I heard your story, to just remember that we're all, dealing with things at different moments in time. And I think that's why it's so important to listen, to not to sort of assume what's important to you. And then I am a really solution-oriented person. That's just how I thrive. And so I think that part of being compassionate is really empowering people to do what's important to them. And so, as you know, that's sort of kind of fundamentally baked into everything that we do.
Yeah, and I love that. I feel like it's that intention that shines through in what you do and how I have watched you personally involve, the patient community in such an organic and beautiful way. And it's very clear that is super important to you. And I think that from the patient's perspective, that's met with deep appreciation and the compassion that you're giving to allow them to be a part of the process of advocating for their cause and advocating for their community. And like you said, being solution-based, I think many people who are in the rare disease space, whether they be a patient themselves or a family member or caregiver, they're wanting solutions, and they're wanting to feel like they can be a part of that solution because they feel so helpless in a lot of ways. And it can just feel so overwhelming. And it's just so nice that there are opportunities like this for them to get involved and that Trend Community is offering that. So
thank you.
I really appreciate everything that you shared with us today. And it's always, I've heard you explain it a couple times, and I think I learn something new every time I hear you talk. It's just Powerful. And it's really, really cool to see how we can bring together that listening aspect and the technology and just move the needle forward for these rare causes. So, lastly, can you tell us where can we go to learn more about your work? How can we follow along and possibly support or get involved in Trend Community's mission? What's your website and your social handles and all that good stuff?
Yeah, our website is trend.community. So there's no .com at the end. It's just trend.community. On social, we're Trend Community. I encourage people, if you're going to the website, to go to there's a real world evidence tab. So there you can get a better understanding of, the potential for the data that we're collecting. And then in terms of getting involved, I mean, our doors are open to any communities that want to partner with us, whether or not there's an obvious path to revenue for that data. So we welcome any community, big or small, to reach out and ask questions and
Join the
Join the
conversation.
conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. Then I will be sure to link in the show notes all the things you just mentioned so that
Great.
people can easily access you and get involved. So thank you so much, Maria, for being here today. Thank
Thanks,
you for the
Christy.
work that you're doing and all the good that you're putting out into the world.
Thank you.